Okay. All right, we're recording. We talked last week before Thanksgiving. Tell me how you're doing.
I'm doing well. I've done another week of a lot of reflecting on our first conversation,
Mm-hmm.
and I did listen um, to that conversation again, and um, it's amazing. In the beginning, I sounded almost like a little kid. I don't know. It was strange.
Yeah.
I don't know if it was nerves, but by the end of the conversation, even my voice was different.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Well, I think we addressed some issues. I think it was it last session that you said you weren't expecting to talk about it. You really didn't want to. You were hoping I don't want to have to go through that. I just want to work on binge eating.
Well, yeah, that's what I expected this whole process to be about.
Yeah.
It is, but of course it is.
Yeah, it's just not the route you thought we were going to take.
Exactly. And so I didn't expect to talk about the molestation or, I didn't expect to talk about my childhood much. I thought we'd be talking about more present day. And so I went back and I listened to the conversation, and it was very powerful. And I didn't realize it last week when we spoke how powerful it was. And so
But you know what that tells me? It tells me that you really needed to have that conversation, like bad. You know? Like that conversation was so intensely necessary that all we had to do was have it, and that's all you needed. Really, there's more work to be done, but that was such a pivotal necessity from out of the gates.
Yes, yeah. Exactly. And it made the connections that I was looking for. And it gave me clarity and perspective and as a base. Where everything else can build upon from there.
Yep. So let's what else? Is there anything else you wanted to say before I kind of chimed in?
Sure. I ended up seeing my mom for Thanksgiving, and on the way there, I thought when I saw her, I would be all emotional when I saw her, but actually when I saw her, I just felt very peaceful. Like I understood her better, and when I talked to her, I felt like I was looking at her differently than I ever had. It was nice. And when I, gave her a hug goodbye, I gave her an extra long hug. And I felt like I was really hugging somebody that I loved, not just somebody I've been sort of, tolerating all these years because I have to because she's my mom.
Can you believe how intense the story changed your experience with her? Your story, meaning that one perspective, how that created an outcome with your mother, whereas we changed the perspective and the outcome naturally changed itself. We didn't have to write a list of things for you to think about and be aware of and make sure you don't think of it this way. Like it was effortless, if that makes sense, by just changing your perception of it. She didn't have to change. She didn't even know you were getting this work, right?
Right.
But
yeah.
How effortless it is when you can open your mind to see it from a different position, even though the position I gave you or opened your mind to look at really let everybody free from being to blame.
Yes, it doesn't erase the past. It doesn't erase what happened.
No.
It just takes the standpoint where I was blaming everyone else for everything, and realizing that everyone here this situation of my life, what happened to me in my childhood, everyone had their own suffering. And I never before now sought help for what happened, and so I've never had that position. And I don't know if I would have believed it before. In my 20s, absolutely not.
Yeah.
I was still angry in my 20s.
Well, you get something out of that blame, and you're getting something out of that anger, right? It's serving you somehow, giving you a sense of survival, giving you a sense of completion, maybe. Right?
It made me feel powerful over them.
Yes. Right. So you can see that you can see that if you need that, even if what I was telling you was true and you deep down could hear it, because you're wanting that power or that blame on them so that you don't have to face the vulnerability of reality, that if you're not willing to let that go, it's a benefit in your mind, in your subconscious. So if you're not willing to surrender that, no matter what truth someone brings to you, you're going to go into denial, just flat out denial, right? Or because it'll create so much dissonance around the reaction to let go of your defense mechanisms, right? So you must have been in such a dark, dark place of suffering to where holding on to that, you were willing to let that go too.
I've been, for years on end. I've had, now I'm realizing, such a level of depression, just not to where medication was needed, and I think I was getting close to that.
Yeah, well, medication doesn't help stuff like this. Medication doesn't help stuff like this. Notice how quickly, once we changed your position or opened your mind to look at it differently, how quickly it resolved. It's a position problem, right? What's medication going to do to that? How's medication going to change your perceptions? No, and some people can tell those things. I'm not to say that medication doesn't serve other purposes, but when it comes to this type of stuff, it just numbs your reality. And you don't make any progress. You don't get any freedom. You're just numb.
Correct. And the root is still there.
Yes. Yep. And that's for people who get help from others who don't necessarily, and we talked about this, like, who are afraid of what happened to you, right? Because they don't have a sense of their capacity. If you went to get help from someone who would be fearful of that and don't think they can handle it, how are they going to help reposition you or open your mind to a place of capacity if they don't have an inherent sense of their own capacity to handle that? So, right. I said that last session. You might have just now went, I can see that. It's like they would have to have that experience and then recover to then feel capable of that experience, to then go into my positionality, open it up, and give me a sense of what I need to feel and see to let it go, and to let all these people go from blame, and to see that no one's to blame. No one.
I like that.
Yeah. So in terms of medication, a lot of people who don't necessarily have the awareness would prescribe, for sure. Especially if you're at risk for suicide,
Yeah, I mean, if I went in and told them I'd been depressed for 30 years, they would have thrown a bottle at me.
Yes, they would have. Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. As part of the tools, to help. Yeah, for sure.
Sure.
I wouldn't blame them,
And that is what I sought out. Someone who has experience in binge-eating or eating disorders also, in general.
Yeah.
And someone who was around my age. I just felt that would be most beneficial for me then.
Well, you went with your instincts. You went with your intuition, so. Good for you. So can you see now how the binge eating aspect of this ties into it as a secondary or tertiary coping mechanism?
Um, uh, I,
If you're feeling
when,
that negative and that victimized and that fearful, can you see why grasping towards body image, and because it is body image based, how that would, especially with the upbringing you had, when you compare it all together, why
oh
food would
yeah,
become, you see what I mean by it's like tertiary, it's not even a main issue, even though it's consciously what you're doing underneath it. There's a lot of darkness and depression, right?
yeah,
So you're trying to find a sense of light and a sense of way out. And it would make sense with your history and with our culture why you would reach towards losing weight, especially if you're blaming your weight to be a big source of block as well.
yeah. And I remember binging as a kid, and it just made me like almost high and happy. Like,
Yeah, well, that's because it's
the
not the
initial parts of it, and it
yeah,
was just like
that's the
that's how I
freedom
felt.
aspect of it. Just keep that in mind. I want to make sure I interject that it's not the food, or even it's the freedom to be able to eat, and to have freedom to eat food without feeling bad, ashamed, and to feel it is a personal decision that no one can take from you. So can you see how that would feel euphoric?
Oh, definitely.
Does that make sense, or
Yeah,
am I just shoving that in your mind and saying it's true? Does that make sense for you when you
it
think
makes
back?
sense, and because when it, the, this sneaky eating began when I was in junior high, around 13 or so.
Yeah, that's when you
But
started to diet,
yeah,
and then your mom started
yeah.
weighing you. Yeah, and that makes sense
Mhm.
too. Wouldn't anybody sneak and eat food? I mean, what?
Right. Well,
Right?
she
So,
started weighing me when I was around 6, but when I uh when I turned 13, I went to junior high and I was starting to get an allowance, and that's when I was starting to buy food and eat in secret.
yeah,
And then when I got to
that tells me
call
you
my
felt bad
last,
about it, right? Eating in secret's a sign you feel bad about it. You're doing something wrong.
yeah, but it was but it didn't. I knew it was wrong, but it didn't feel wrong. And then when I got to college, I left home at 17, went to college, and that's when the actual binging began because I was away from home,
Yeah,
and
and you had freedom.
I had freedom and money to um, buy chip and dip whenever I wanted.
Yeah, you weren't being withheld anymore. Plus, you probably had resentment for your mom. Remember all that resentment that you came into it? That resentment and anger. So
Yeah.
eating is your way of flipping them off, saying "f you."
Okay.
Well, does that feel about right? Like the
Yeah.
energy behind it should connect. Like, yeah, no wonder I'm gonna eat. I'm basically telling them to screw off. I'm getting out of here. I got to do what I want. So you kind of overcompensate.
I did, and those last few, my high school years at home, except for 1 year I was an exchange student, but
Mm-hmm.
the 3 of the 4 years while I was at home, we were moving a lot and hungry, and
Poor.
I was just happy to be out of there, but I also felt guilty for leaving my sister behind. Now
Mm-hmm.
my sister had to deal with it, and so a lot of it was guilt too, um, for leaving my sister behind um, with my crazy mom, and and so when I got on my own, it was just I just instead of being happy that I made look at where how far I made it,
I did it.
actually
Mm-hmm.
got it. I just was like, yeah, I made it, and now I'm gonna stuff my face whenever I want.
Yeah. Did
And then
you?
part of it was having food too, but I just went
Mm-hmm.
completely. I didn't know how to handle it. I guess.
Yeah. Well, I wouldn't be surprised if you, at some point, and you probably have memory of this, You consciously said, I don't care if I gain weight. I really don't care. Because at some point I'll fix it. But in the moment, I am just going to give myself freedom. I'm not going to worry about it. So there, at some point, you committed to gaining weight, believing that at some point you would fix it. Do you recall that moment?
I don't.
Go back into your college. Go back into college where you really got freedom.
I had freedom, but I was still dealing with at-home issues. Like, there was still, at home didn't change when I left. They were still getting evicted. I was helping them out with money when I had it. You know, it was stressful for me because a lot of times I thought, I'm here in college. Can I just get some peace and try to be a college kid?
Okay, that feeling right there. That feeling right there. Can I just catch a break?
When will it end?
Yeah, well, when you're managing all of that, can you see where losing weight could be is the least of your priorities? It's so superficial. It's like, screw it.
Yeah, definitely. And at the time, I was maybe 10 pounds overweight. I mean, we can even call it that. I had 10 pounds extra.
Yeah, do you?
And it was really nothing. But that's when it really truly began, was when I left home.
Okay, there was a conscious decision in there. You made a conscious decision. You may have forgotten about it, where you said, screw it, I can't worry about it right now. There was a conscious decision at some point.
Okay.
That doesn't mean you weren't in your mind still trying to diet or restrict. It was just you kind of put it aside. Weight loss, you put weight loss aside at some point, knowing that at some point you'll bring it back. Either that or your restrictions got 10 times worse at that point, trying to maintain your weight loss or your thinness. I mean, there's a variety of different things that could have happened. But did you have any bulimia at that point? Did you purge?
No, I have no purging.
Through puking.
No anorexia, aside from the starving dieting part of it.
Well, the desire to be the desire to be thinner is anorexic in nature, right?
But no, it's been just binging. Yeah, binging and dieting.
Okay, so dieting is a purge. So just really quick, when you were in college, did you diet at all? Or in your mind?
Yes, I did.
Okay.
I did.
Okay.
Let's see. Okay, what does Weight Watchers count?
Yeah, of course. Any type of food restriction. But dieting, for a lot of people, if we really look at it, that's just the active enforcement of restrictions. And, excuse me, you can still believe I should be restricting. Again, that's the anorexia. I should be restricting. I shouldn't be doing this. I should be restricting. How often did you feel that way compared to that had, with the binging you were in, there had to have been guilt, obviously.
Yes, I would say the first year, because I lived in the dorms, I don't think any dieting, true restriction occurred. Because that was my first year of I can do whatever I want, and I actually found a binge friend who had a car, and we would drive to the store and get our binge food and almost binge every night together. Kind of weird.
Well, you might not have seen it as binging. You probably thought it was having fun. We're gonna go have fun.
Yeah. Yes. And then I think as a kid, my mom did Weight Watchers a lot. And so when I noticed that the pounds were really coming on, the I think it was my second year of college. I joined Weight Watchers because I had gone with my mom as a kid to her meetings, and so that was familiar to me.
Okay, so at some point,
so I tried it. So
I'm going to go back to your freshman year.
19 years old.
I'm going to go back to your freshman year. At some point during that year, you said, screw it. I just don't want to care right now. At some point, if I get a certain weight, I'll go back. But right now, I'm going to give myself freedom from worrying about it, caring about it. Right? So you allowed weight gain up into a certain point.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
That had to be it. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's why I keep on repeating. Now look back and you can see at some point I made a conscious decision that I was okay gaining weight. There might have been like up into a certain point, you gave your body a certain grace period, but you just didn't want to handle it or worry about it or care about it in the moment. You just kind of wanted to just get your freedom. And by accepting that weight gain, you don't have to weigh yourself. You don't have to have any pressure. You don't have to restrict in any way. You can just relax and have fun and enjoy yourself. Especially with food, right?
Yeah, and then I took it to the nth degree.
Yeah, well, especially if you know at some point when my life is easier, I will put that energy back into restricting food. Right? Because it really takes quite a bit of mental, emotional, and physical energy to restrict because you're going against your nature. You're going against survival. So it requires your energy be devoted towards it. So when your life is sucky and you're under like freshman in college trying to get, integrated in reality there and studying, and you've got the stress of sending money home and your guilt with your sibling, can you see why you didn't have the energy necessary to diet at that time?
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah, you only have so much energy, life energy, that can be devoted, to something as intense and draining as dieting. So if your life was draining, can you see where you would say, I'm putting weight loss on pause. I'm not going to worry about it. That had to have felt so exciting for you. That type of food euphoria, that, again, it's freedom euphoria, not food euphoria, had to have felt really good. And no wonder you had a binge partner. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Looking back and you see like, I was coming out of such a hostile, toxic survival environment and I just wanted a break. So why deprive yourself of food? You would have had to have isolated yourself from reality, to do it. So your sophomore year, you probably felt like you had enough shit together that you could do it. Or that you needed to now control yourself. There had to have been enough balance for you to devote more energy to dieting. So does that sound pretty much like the last 20, 30 years of your life?
Pardon me?
How old are you?
43.
Yeah, 43. Does that sound like the last 20 years of your life now? What I just described, kind of going back and forth between those? That way of being?
Oh, definitely.
Yeah, the freedom, saying I don't have time, I don't have energy for this, screw it. The euphoria of the freedom, knowing you have freedom now, you don't have to worry about your weight, you don't have to worry about weight gain because you're committed to, at some point when life is easier, you will devote your energy to fixing the weight gain you caused.
Yeah, and my life, has been easy in the past, so many years. I mean, I still have my mom and sister out when they need it, but it's definitely not a dire situation, especially in the past. I see the past 10 years.
Would you say that that's put a lot more pressure on you to restrict food? Because you're like, I should be able to restrict now. I should be fixing my weight now.
I didn't look at it that way.
So we would put more pressure.
I would restrict the more I gain.
Well, for sure. Well, that's what I'm trying to get you to see is like if your life is much easier and you're supposed to do what you're supposed to do, you're supposed to go to weight loss church and you're just fatigued and don't want to do it, can you see how your guilt about it is going to go up? Let me see if I can paint this picture. So before, your pause of dieting would be because life was heavy and hard and too much. So you would pause dieting, put the energy into food and doing what you needed to do, giving yourself a break. When life was easier, you could devote yourself to Weight Watchers or some type of weight loss program. And what happened then, because you don't feel as bad when there's life stress, it gives you almost like a reason to be able to compensate yourself with food, right? But now you don't have a reason. So what happens then is the guilt that you experience with food is going to go up, even though your food consumption is the same as it was before. But before you had a negative life consequences or life circumstances that gave you a reason to overeat. So without that reasoning, you are now left to feel bad about it. So that shame and guilt about eating, can you see how that would pressurize your need to restrict? And it's almost like the famine now is right on your tail. It's knocking on the door, right? The famine is knocking on the door, and why you would probably that might increase your binging impulsivity, knowing that tomorrow I'm going to do it tomorrow, and so that might have really kind of turned the fire on underneath what's going with your relationship with food, even though there's no real life circumstance that could make it dieting hard.
That makes complete sense.
Does it?
And I never saw it that way.
Does it sound about right?
It does. It does. And it's just never made sense why I would continue to struggle when initially the struggle was about finances, and it hasn't been that way lately, for years, and just, why couldn't get it together, so to speak.
You're putting too much pressure on yourself to lose weight. Too much. Way too much. Right? And you can see with that much pressure, it really it transfers into the pressure to restrict food. So the more pressure you have to restrict food, the more perfectionistic your dieting needs to be. And when you're dieting or your food restrictions, when you approach it with perfectionism, what's the likelihood you are going to fail and then binge?
Every time.
Yeah. Yeah, that's how binge eaters end up binging multiple times a day or every day. Is every day they become more restrictive, more perfectionistic, which increases their likelihood of small deviations that end up being like a dam breaking.
Yeah, and sometimes it could be not even food, like, the diet could be perfect, going perfect, and a circumstance would happen, like somebody would say something to me, or
Let's see.
I don't know.
That goes back to your previous relationship with food, where when life gets difficult or pressurized.
Even if it's like something I've been dealing with, I don't know, it's like a work thing. It's usually like a stupid work thing, or I'm in the car driving and hearing a song. I don't know. It's really hard to.
No, you had to have felt deprived enough to where you were on that tiny of a tightrope. Even if, yeah, you've done fine on your diet. If something, it's still hyper pressurized. So even if there is no deviation, or actually this is how a deviation occurs. I know it did for me. I'd been fine on my diet. I'd been fine on my restrictions. But that moment I just wanted a bite. I just want to taste. I'm hungry. I really would like this. I'll just have a bite. The one moment you have a bite, it's like, screw it. I failed. Well, then I'll have 2 more bites. I'll just have a few more bites. And now I feel like it's irreparable. fat gain from it. So I might as well just open the floodgates, let the day be done, have as much food as I can today, because tomorrow I'm going to go back into the restrictions and I'm going to not ever eat that food again.
Yeah, I've done that. Timer 2000.
Yeah, well, all of it kind of goes away when you stop dieting and stop trying to lose weight. Without the shame attached to the body image. That's the key, right? Because you could say, well, I've stopped dieting and stopped trying to lose weight many times. In fact, I was all excited to gain weight while I was eating my food. This is very different because there's no shame attached to weight loss. Right? So imagine that you never again have to lose the weight. How much do you weigh right now?
253.
How tall are you?
5'2".
So imagine you're going to be 250 pounds the rest of your life. This is permanent. What's the first feeling that comes to your mind?
I would have to accept it.
No, that's not the first feeling. You skipped ahead. Come back down.
Oh.
That's fine. You didn't do anything wrong. I just want you to come back. You kind of skipped a little bit. I want you to go into, imagine this is true and real, where you're going to be this size for the rest of your life. There's no hope for you to lose weight. You're never going to be thinner. It's never going to happen. So all the energy you've been devoting and thinking, I need to lose weight, it's useless. You're never going to lose weight. No matter what you do, you'll lose weight and always regain it. For the rest of your life, you can devote yourself to losing weight, and whatever you lose, you're going to regain. So you may get down to 200, but you're going to end up back up here. Back and forth, back and forth. It's always going to end up right here. So how's that feel? What's the first emotion?
First one is annoyance.
Okay, go into that. Why? Where's that annoyance coming from?
Because I'd be putting in that effort just to get right back where I was.
Yeah, waste. It feels wasteful.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so now go into, okay, well, I'm going to be this size permanently, forever. Till the day this body dies, I'm going to be this size when I die.
Then restricting wouldn't have the power, or there wouldn't have be the pressure to restrict.
Yeah, that seems a little ridiculous too, right?
Yeah.
Because the only reason you would try to be in a food deficit is to lose weight, and it's extremely difficult. The energy, again, remember when I said restricting food requires a lot of energy, life energy. It's a lot of it. It's not just like 25% of your life energy. It's like 90%.
Yes.
Okay, now go into the body, how you would relate to this body. How does it feel to know that this body's always going to be 250 pounds?
Well, I'd have to look at it differently instead of hating it. I'd have to realize this was the only one I have.
Well, yeah, let's go into that right now. Go in that spot right there. Go into it. And I want you to tell me how that feels. What's the first emotion you experience? Don't skip forward. Just go into the first thing that comes up. You're going to be this size forever for the rest of your life. There's no hope for change. This is it.
I need to treat it better.
Okay, is that the first feeling you come up with?
Well, I mean, aside from annoying right now, I mean, I'm still in the part where, like, oh, really? Okay.
Are you in denial?
Probably.
Okay, so let's remove the denial. Okay, see, I can tell you're not going there. What's the first emotion you feel? Look at your body. Look at it. This is it. It's never going to get better. The likelihood you're going to be smaller than this is 0.03%.
Well, I'm happy with my height. I can't change my height. I'm 5'2", and that's just kind of the way it goes.
So you've accepted that, right? So
I've accepted my height.
Okay, so what happens if you accept this size in this weight?
Then
What happened to the binging?
It would the binging wouldn't have the power because the weight's going to end up the same. Or am I missing something?
Yeah.
I feel like we're not very connected right now.
It's okay. What I'm trying to get you to do is really go into how you would feel. Imagine we're in a hospital and you're at the doctor's office and he says, "All right." She says,
"Oh, okay.
"You're going to
Thank God I
be..."
don't have to diet anymore."
Well, hold on. Just stay present with me, okay?
Okay.
There is no right answer. I want you to go into how it would feel emotionally for you. Immediately, the immediate emotion would be as if this is happening in real time. I have some news for you. You have a metabolic cancer. This body fat that you've gained over the years, there's been damage done. The likelihood that you're going to ever lose another pound is slim to nothing. If you lose a pound, your body's going to really work to gain a pound. This is it. You'll never lose weight. No diet on the planet's going to work. Even if you were to go get liposuction, your body's going to do what's necessary to gain the fat back, and you'll gain it somewhere else. So what we want, you need to accept you are going to be 250 to 260 pounds permanently till the day you die. Would you cry? Would that be upsetting for you?
No, it wouldn't.
Why? Tell me why.
Because I would feel relief that I don't have to keep working to be thinner.
Mm-hmm.
And at the same time, I don't have to harm myself with food either.
Yeah. Do you get that sense that the food that you've been using is only there because of the restrictions that you felt you needed to enforce?
Yes.
Yeah. So the restrictions, there's no point to the restrictions now. There's no power in them. So that kind of diffuses and lets out the pressure behind binging, doesn't it? Doesn't binging just seem a little ridiculous then?
Correct. Well, what's the point?
I know.
I know that after the binging, I get to restrict, right?
Yeah, there's no restriction to save you. So if you binge, it's permanent damage. More so. There's no way to recoup the damages or to get rid of the damages now.
Because at the beginning of a binge, it's like the euphoria, and then it goes away quickly, and then you start thinking, okay, even during the binge, I start thinking about the restriction.
Yeah.
Okay,
well, don't you agree that the gatekeeper to the binge is the moment you say, you know what, I'll fix this later, and then boom, the binge is open.
Yeah, because then I'm going to repair it later, no matter what happens.
And so that is the key to open the gate to the binge right there, is that I will repair this later. I will repair this later. So if there's no reparations, there's no repairing.
Right.
What happens to the binge?
It loses its power and its necessity.
Well, then you're like, I wouldn't want to do that.
Exactly.
Notice how this has nothing to do with the food. It doesn't matter what you're eating. It doesn't matter if it's pumpkin pie. It doesn't matter if it's candy. It doesn't matter anything. You would be like, I don't want to binge on that. So how would you then eat? How would you eat then?
When I wanted to or needed to.
Well, what defines that?
Like a normal person.
Yeah. Right, where food isn't so important.
Well, if I use my in-laws as a gauge, they do not have binge-eating disorders. They're well-adjusted people. They eat like when they're hungry.
Do they allow themselves to eat whatever they want?
Oh, yeah.
No shame, no guilt.
No.
And they probably eat a variety of different foods. There's no conversations. Yeah. There's no conversation about, oh my God, I shouldn't be eating this. They don't have that guilt.
It's not that, my conversation, I shouldn't be eating this. It's like, it's like what a typical normal food person does is like, oh, I shouldn't have that second piece, and then they just move on. It's just more of a statement rather than thinking about that for a whole week.
Yeah, because they can eat more later, and it's not worth being sick over.
Right. It's just normal, and I've had many times where I thought, okay, this Christmas, I'm going to eat what my sister-in-law eats. I'm going to practice that. That's horrible. And it's normal food, and it's good, but then it's like, then I feel the guilt and the shame that I had to do that, like a baby.
Yeah, well, you're gonna have to relearn this somehow. So go back to this weight permanently.
Okay.
Is there anything that you would feel lost from it? Like you'd have to let go of things? What would you have to let go of?
Like guilt and shame with food.
Well, with your body image. Is there anything that when you used to think, I need to lose weight, what were you hoping for with that weight loss?
I was hoping that people would like me more.
So you'd have to be okay with people not liking you, right? Permanently. That's where I want you to go. If I am this size forever, that means that people that don't like me because of my weight will never like me.
Which means I probably shouldn't care if they liked me or not.
Right.
Because intellectually, it's
yeah.
And I've always spent my life, even if, say, it wasn't on Weight Watchers, right? If something comes out about weight, oh, yeah, I'm on Weight Watchers, just so that people who never met me before would go, oh, she's working on it. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Doing something about it.
Yeah, so you would have to not say a word. That's so common. You're defending yourself by excusing your body, right? So if this is permanent, would you for the rest of your life excuse it to people?
No.
That's a sign you feel bad about it, right? That I feel bad about it, so I should excuse it but then that puts you under more pressure, right? Like now I have to perform for these people because next time they see me, they're going to expect that I lose weight. If I don't lose weight, they'll know I'm a liar.
Yeah. And that's one of the reasons I've been off of social media. So you're going to be the only person who knows the truth. Okay. So when the whole election issue happened with Trump, like a year ago, October, when it really started getting big, I got off social media and I told everyone it was just because I didn't want to deal with the election issues anymore in my feed, blah, blah, blah. But it was actually I was so embarrassed that all these years later, I was still fat after all the diets that I just was embarrassed. The people I went to college with and the current people that I know. And so I've stayed off social media since then. And I can't really say like all that mania with Trump as an excuse anymore. But
I was pretty sick of it, and I'm still sick of it too. I'm not on Facebook either. I turned mine off.
Yeah,
anyway.
So that's really the truth why I got off of it.
Yeah. Well, were you hoping then to lose weight before you turn it back on?
Oh, yes.
Oh, you're holding yourself hostage.
I'm just like off of it until that happens.
Yeah.
When I come back, I'm going to be better than ever.
Yeah. So you kind of added more pressure. That increases the likelihood of your binging because you're isolating yourself now. It's like you're holding yourself hostage. Imagine doing that to another girl who's 250 pounds, saying you can't talk to people. You have to be thin before you can come out of the closet. You're going in the closet until you're thin. So you don't get to exist.
Interesting.
Like you're holding yourself hostage. This is why I think this is a syndrome. These are all signs of hostage. You can't go out. You cannot eat. You don't get to eat. You don't get to socialize until you behave.
I never looked at it that way. I mean, I would never tell. If somebody told me they were going to do that, I'd tell them they were ridiculous.
Well, it's cruel.
What are you waiting for?
It's cruel. That's abuse. That's terrible. That's horrible. Right? So, but the problem is that you feel that bad about your weight that abuse is okay. And this is how people who are held hostage end up self abusing themselves, is because they truly believe they deserve the abuse. And so they don't need an abuser anymore because they are the abuser. They abuse themselves. They don't need someone to punish them. They punish themselves.
Is that what I've been doing?
Yeah. Yeah. Because you believe you deserve it. That's how. So we have to really look at, is this worthy of you feeling this bad about? You've really not understood it very well, have you? It's not like you were intentionally and maliciously hurting yourself. You didn't think this was hurtful. You thought that it was going to help you, like punishing yourself and isolating yourself. You really believed that that would help you. How did it end up working out?
Making it worse.
Yeah, you didn't know that.
All these years.
Yeah. So you don't, it's forgivable, don't you think? I mean, if any human being felt that bad about themselves, wouldn't it make sense that they would go to extremes in their mind to try to get themselves to change? Yeah. Yeah. So you have to really look at, is this worthy of feeling bad about? Is being 250 pounds really worthy of shame? Think about what is worthy of shame. Shame is a very, like, you've done something horrible. Is this really worthy of shame?
No. Not on the scale that I know.
Right. I always go to torturing little puppies and kittens. Maybe that's worthy of shame. But even then, there's some weird reason people do stuff like that, right?
Something going on, exactly.
Yeah, so really go into what is worthy of shame to the point where you should isolate yourself from humanity. Sure, someone who is, willing to murder and kill people for fun, they should be in jail, they should be in isolation, they need help, right?
Right, yeah.
And see, notice how easily we're like, are they really worthy of shame? Because there's probably some psychological trauma. And again,
right.
So let's go into any human person, no matter what, no matter who it is, including yourself. Is this worthy of shame and isolation and starving yourself and embarrassment and hiding?
Absolutely not.
Should you be embarrassed?
No.
Especially with the history, and you've honestly done a really good job. Exceptional, right? A+. So if you have to be 250 pounds to get out, it's like your get out of jail for free card. I'm giving it to you right now. Wouldn't you rather just stay 250 pounds and get out and move on with your life, right? Live freely. Yeah. Do you think that if given the opportunity, if you can ignore your body, ignore what happens to it, ignore its size, black it out from your need to think about, like black it out from your thoughts, do you think the body will handle itself?
I think so. I mean, it's when you're sick, it repairs itself.
Yeah. Well,
right?
yeah. If you're done binging, you give it kind of a balance of just normal, again, quote unquote normalness, right?
Right.
Don't you think that?
See, and I've always thought that the dieting was normal.
Like, that's not normal. No.
Getting it back to where it should be.
Does it really need you to do that? Especially if the restriction and dieting is promoting this pressure with food. Should you be depriving yourself if it's what promotes the binging? So if you really, even if you think about the health of the body, should you be dieting if it promotes this distorted relationship with food?
No, not at all.
So what if you just eat like a kid, like mac and cheese? And that's where I started with kid food. Like a normal person. Give yourself the lenience and grace to be a normal human being with food. No depriving, no dieting, no shame, no guilt. No, you did something wrong. Oh, you shouldn't do that. None of that permanently. What do you think's going to happen? How do you think that's going to feel to the body? Because it also includes no binging, and you're no longer using food for some emotional outlet, right? So you're relieving that too. It's both directions.
I think my body would be grateful when I wasn't starving and then slamming it with salt and carbs.
I have salt and carbs every day. It's the slamming that's not good, is it?
Right.
Slamming. It's not the salt and the carbs that's the problem.
The slam, yeah.
It's the extreme response to the restriction. In fact, I would say getting rid of salt and starch is not good, right? So it's the removal of it that creates the slamming of it.
Yeah, I meant the binging aspect of it.
Yeah, both sides.
Dieting and then slamming it.
Depriving and then impulsively going overboard. So if you just ignore your body, it's going to last and do better relative to what you've been doing. So do you really have to do something different? I mean, or do you really need to focus on the body for it to fix itself? Can it fix itself without you focusing on it? If you remove the all or nothing component to approach to food.
Oh, it fixes itself every day.
I know. Yeah.
I didn't realize that either.
Yeah. So what happens if you just ignore it? No hope for loss. It's no expectations. You get total and complete mental and emotional freedom from thinking about it, worrying about it, or having it on your list of things to do.
I can concentrate on other things, put my energy somewhere else.
Well, for sure, it's freedom. You get a lot of freedom.
Yeah. I wouldn't feel like a mental case about it.
So what do you think the solution to this binge eating is?
Well, if the dieting brings on the binge eating, then...
Well, the dieting is actually the consequence of feeling bad about your weight. Right?
Yeah.
We're not just talking, I feel bad about my weight. I'm ashamed and embarrassed of my weight.
Yeah.
Right? So how are we going to get rid of binge eating?
Feel better. Like, get rid of the shame and the guilt about the weight.
Yeah, unconditionally. The goal is that you don't... So that's what you've been trying to do, is get rid of the shame and the guilt about your weight, but you thought to do that you had to lose weight to get rid of the shame and the guilt. Right?
Yes.
So what we're going to do is we're going to say, nuh-uh, you don't have to lose weight. There's nothing wrong with what's happened to your body. It's not, you shouldn't be ashamed of this. Shame should be reserved for something much darker and demonic than this.
So it's the other way around.
Mm-hmm. You flip it, yeah. You do not have to lose weight. There is nothing wrong. This is not worthy of shame. You do not need to be embarrassed either. Today. Now. Body's done a good job. And to be honest with you, you have too. Under that type of insanity, you've kicked ass. Above and beyond normal. Look at all the energy you put into that. That is so much. It's inspiring. It's like, oh, it's so amazing, isn't it?
Yeah, it's been a lifetime of work.
Yeah, no shit. Something to be proud of. You know? You just didn't know that what you were trying to do created the opposite of what you wanted. So for you to really recover now from the binge eating, you have to release yourself from the shame and the guilt. You have to forgive yourself for being completely misdirected. Forgive your mom for being misdirected. It's not like you were going in a direction. It was just completely backwards. Right?
Yes.
And now you have all these consequences and you can see clearly. The more I want to lose weight, the worse I feel about my weight. The more I cling to a restrictive diet, the more I cling to the restrictive diet, the more I'm going to binge. And it all makes sense. None of it is wrong. In fact, we could look at the dieting and say, well, the dieting is wrong. But in reality, the dieting only exists because you're ashamed of your weight. And why are you ashamed of your weight? Well, cultural dogma, thin supremacy.
Yeah. It's always been about being thin.
Yep. That's the problem, is the idea that you have to be thin to be free. And if you keep on thinking that, you'll never escape, right?
Right.
So do you have to be thin to feel good about yourself right now?
No.
That would be the goal, right? That's the goal.
That is the goal.
Yep, the goal is that you are not ashamed anymore, and that it is unconditional. There is no need for you to be thinner. There is no need at all. The body does not have to do anything for you to be happy, to give yourself freedom. The body is a physicality. Your shame about it is not a physical shame. It's an actual psychological shame that can be changed by looking at it from a different perspective. So you are now going to do for yourself what you did for your molester and your mom. You are going to give yourself grace and see that this is so forgivable, that the destructiveness and the shame and the guilt that you've carried it wasn't deserved. That what you've done is totally forgivable. You really thought what you were doing was the right thing to do. Even in the moment you're binging, that in your mind was the right thing to do in that moment. For whatever reason, it felt like you needed it. Right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So, you just were disoriented. Who would have thought that feeling ashamed about your weight was the go button on that binge, right?
Right.
So there's no reason for you to be ashamed anymore. You haven't done anything wrong. Your body image and the body's function and the way it really has nothing to do with you. It's a physical body. You didn't really have anything to do with it. You didn't choose this body when you came here. You just got one. This is the one you got. And it came with millions of years of evolution behind it, functioning as it should, including the psychology of starvation and deprivation. That was wired to it as well. So you can't even claim your binge eating is your fault. Because it's kind of a consequence of a variety of things happening, and it's based on evolution around famine, you know?
Mhm.
So is it forgivable?
Most definitely.
Yeah. Yeah. So that's our next step, is looking at the shame that you've carried about your body image and releasing yourself from it, and for totally and completely forgiving yourself, loving yourself, and loving this body as it is. No conditions. How's that feel?
Feels free just to live your life without putting a veil of, not really living in the present, but like I haven't always felt present in everything I've been working for. When this happens.
Doesn't need to happen anymore. You're relieved of it. How's that feel?
It feels centered, and and freedom to just enjoy life without having to think about the weight and not being an issue.
Feels liberating. Like I can move on with my life. My life can open up now. I can push the start button.
Right.
Feels good.
It will take practice.
Well, you just need to sit with this, and because I'm giving you permission, you have to go in and do this. This is where my work. This is where, if you've watched other clients recover, this is where they did it. I can't do this for you. I can just say, you need to forgive yourself. You need to go in and release yourself from the shame, and you need to, release yourself from fixing this weight. It is none of your business. I can tell you that. You need to go into deep contemplation around your life for permanently being relieved from managing your weight. Permanently. Thin or fat or anything in between, you're blind to it. Imagine and go into it, and it has to be done by you. I can't do this for you. And this is where the recovery occurs. It's right in this. We're at the target right now. We're there. The only way for you to get this freedom is to accept your weight as it is all the time. Make sense?
Yeah, for sure.
All right, I gotta go.